Hi, this is Kim with www.embody-light.com, and I did hypnotherapy, psychic readings, energy healing, sound healing, Akashic Records work, twin flame work, all kinds of work. Just go ahead and check out my website, www.embody-light.com. So today's video, you can see some of the stuff in the background, the cloud. I'm going to call this in one of my series, Cloud Nine. And because what I'm talking about today is collectives. And one of the very first collectives, although I didn't know it at the time that I started working with, was um, the Sound Collective. And when I when I finally figured out what was going on, I kept hearing the word Magi, Magi, Magi. And we heard about these in the Bible. These were the three beings that brought, after the birth of Christ, that brought the gifts. And what they are is a collective of people, a group of souls that have a commonality that kind of hang together. And now, within these souls, within this collective is the oversouls of specific individuals, and I'll tell you who some of the individuals from this collective are. But what you have is you have the main soul who can have up to 8 physical incarnations at one time. Some do that, others don't. But the collective of the soul, the oversoul, after each lifetime ends and that person being comes back and rejoins them, it's a collective of experiences. But what you would find within this oversoul group, pretty much their their individual personalities. You would be able to channel the individual personalities, and the individual personalities make up the sum total of that being, that oversoul being. And so I talked about that some in my last video. But so right when I first started waking up, which was back in the early, I always was psychic and like I would say halfway awake. But when I first started waking up, that would have been the early 2000s. I kept, and I had talked about this in other videos, I kept getting all of these messages and finding all of these unusual things that I wanted. I'd just think about it and then I'd find it. Like one of the things was I was collecting antique pictures of Christ, and I just thought one day it would be cool if I had one that was kind of finished in a cherry brown wood and a brownish color. And the next day I was going out and I saw a garage sale sign. I went up the street to the garage sale. They had that exact picture that I wanted, and that kept happening over and over and over again. And so I'm driving along, and I just I get a lot of messages when I'm driving. And I just asked, who is this? Who's doing this? Who's guiding me here? And I get the song, which I always do because I'm clairaudient, and I'm going to explain this in a little bit. I get the song. Um, it's an old Barry Manilow song, which I wasn't a Barry Manilow fan, but it was, I write the songs that make the young girls sing. I write the songs of love and everything. And so I kept just talking and asking questions of this voice. I wouldn't call it an outside voice, but like inner thoughts in your head. And I kept getting the word Magi. Well, so what I found out was this specific collective um, is actually composed of a lot of different artists and musicians. And what their purpose is to, they're all working towards the purpose of helping with the ascension on planet Earth. And they are using music to inspire people. Now, people who are clairaudient, um, especially ones that hear music, that's a pretty good indication that you've had a past life in Arcturus, or Arcturius, however you say it, because they were known specifically for sound healing. So within this collective, um, one of the people that I channel, and I don't do this live, but he talks to me a lot. And I know people who are very close to him that knew him in this lifetime that I will channel him for them. But I've never been one who wants to come on and do the showy kind of thing, talking to celebrities and that. That just wasn't my life purpose, but I will talk to them for the purpose of healing. So just talk about Prince for a minute. He's kind of a wild guy. I would call him that. He is got a very strong personality and he comes through very strongly when he's talking to you. I've spoken with him many times. There's many, many, many in this collective. And I found out some very interesting things. So within this collective is, and you're going to see up here, I have pictures of the from the 1960s, the Bewitched show. And I'm going to just point right here. This guy specifically played Uncle Arthur, and his name is Paul Lynde. Well, come to find out, he's one of the people, beings, souls, I guess you would call, that are within this collective. Now, he may be already having another lifetime. I don't know that. I didn't ask him that. But you can easily pick out specific personalities out of the collective if they want to talk to you. So Paul Lynde is one that I've been talking to. And very interesting, when I write poetry, he is the main inspirer of the poetry. And I want to talk about the show a little bit before I go a little bit more into who he is and how I found out about all this. So, anyways, whenever the nefarious side is going to do something, they have to get consent. But the way they get consent is not informed consent, it's tricking you. And so on this show, and I know so many people talk about actors and musical people that have sold out and gone to the dark side, signed a contract with the devil, so they say. And those people do really what they're signing away. A lot of times they don't know it is their soul rights, which can't really be sold, but they're tricked into believing they can be. So on this show, it was a huge disclosure to tell us what would be coming and how to counteract it. It really was. It was not all bad, like people say, or people think. People think witchcraft and witches are bad. Let me talk about that a little bit later on here. But some of the things they showed us on this show, that there's white magic and black magic. Magic is just a manipulation of the energies. We all do it to manifest. But white magic is no different than healing or energy work and that kind of thing. It's something that genetically you're born with these abilities depending on what incarnations your soul has had and what you've carried with you. And once you have an experience in a human lifetime and you go back to your soul form, that experience and knowledge always stays with you. So on this show, they showed us the white magic, the black magic. And I just want to speak one more thing about the white magic, where so many, and I've talked to Source many times about this. So many people, you'll hear them say, "Oh, tarot cards are bad. This is bad. That's bad." Nothing is bad per se, and there is no good or bad, but it's how you use it. And the white magic is working with the way the energies work to accomplish certain goals. And even Yeshua, in his life on earth, his healing was, you could call it actually white magic. What he actually did was he studied with some monks, and he learned how to do Reiki, and monks, healers, whoever. And so this is a way of energy, you could call it manipulation, but it's manipulating it for a benevolent purpose for the healing or well-being of another person. And per Christ and per source, that is not inappropriate or wrong. It's no different than saying a prayer for someone who's sick and asking healing angels to come and help them. It is no different. I know a lot of people want to be kind of snooty with it, and if it's not done with Jesus, Jesus is the only way. Yeshua, not Jesus. Well, personally, I do work with Yeshua. I was on the planet and at the time that he was alive, and I knew him. I was a part of their group, a part of their family, however you want to call it. And so that is an experience and a knowledge I'll always take with me. And for those of us that were there with him, we can still hear him to this day, and we can still communicate with him. Others can too, but it's just that because there's familiarity there, you're able to channel them. And so some of the things they showed us on this TV show, and now at the time, the majority of the population felt that past lives were absolutely ridiculous. Well, they did show us past lives. They did show us timelines and time travels. How many times in that show did they go back into a past timeline and alter something so that it would turn out better in this timeline? They did it over and over again. And I got to look at my notes here. The other thing they showed us is, and it doesn't. This was an exaggeration. It doesn't quite work that way. But when something would happen, um, and they get mad at somebody, it was usually the mother-in-law and Dora, Samantha's mother, turning Darren into an animal or somebody else into an animal, and then they have to go get him from the dog pound. What they were kind of showing us, and at the time, and actually till probably the last couple years, I didn't know this either. I did not think that the species ever crossed, that a person that was a person would come back into lifetime as an animal. Well, they can. Or you can have lifetimes as an animal and then elevate to have lifetimes as a person. So that does really happen. They showed us that. Um, they showed us the hierarchy, which when they'd have the specific ones, one I'm thinking of, and this was my favorite. This was my favorite show when I was a little girl. I'll tell you more about that. But they had aunts and older witches come to their house, Samantha and Darren's house, when Tabitha was a baby, and they were testing her to see if she was gifted. Well, what they were really showing us was, go back into way into antiquity, when the gods walked the earth with mortals, they were not supposed to intermingle and mate, because the offspring, some of them would be deities, which means they had some special abilities, if you want to call it that, but not the same as if two gods got together and created a child. That child would have different gifts and abilities. And so they were showing us that what could happen if there was a crossing with a deity or a being with magical abilities or spiritual abilities and a normal human. You just didn't know what would happen. And as it turned out, they're on the show, of course, their two children were spiritually gifted or called witches and warlocks. So this episode, the one I was talking about where they come in and test Tabitha to see if she has special abilities, was always my very favorite one. I would laugh hysterically at that show. Well, as it turns out, I didn't know that I was any different than anyone else. Just because of the abuse and because of my genetics, I had abilities that other children didn't know. And just like on that show, I never even knew it until, oh, I was in my early 30s. And I've talked about this, and I'll link the videos in other episodes where my pediatrician kept dropping hints. And that's how I finally found out I was psychic. I just thought everybody was psychic. And the other interesting thing is with this pediatrician, and I think I mentioned it in the last video that I talked about this, um, he he was recognizing it much before I was. And I just thought it was normal. And it took a while till I figured out what these subtle hints he was dropping was talking about. But I just thought I was like normal and had mother's intuition, woman's intuition. And at one point, I almost told him, "This is normal. Go ask your wife." But apparently, that's not normal in his household. So, anyways, it was kind of funny. So, the other thing Yeshua, and I just got the download too, specifically told me to mention when using magic or manipulation of energies, if someone is pure of heart, it's not a problem at all. It's when somebody has an agenda or is trying to disrupt another person's personal will, that's where the problem comes in. And so I'm going to ask people to make a comment here. I don't know if this was typical or not, but the area that I grew up in was a suburb of Minneapolis when I was a small child called St. Louis Park. And it was very common in that area because my personal opinion and my guides have told me, I think it was called Project Paperclip after World War II supposedly ended, which it never did. It just went subtle and underground. They brought all these scientists and doctors from Germany back into our country, other countries as well, gave them new identities, a lot of them, and they just carried on like nothing ever happened. Well, I happen to know that in the area I lived in, we had a large portion of them. And so they knew about genetic manipulation and that kind of thing. And it was very common practice. That's what I'm wondering. That's a question I have. If anybody else had this experience, where it was just a common thing where children would say, and I'm going to say cancel after I say this, but this was all the time when you were playing with your friends and they tell you a secret and they didn't want you to tell anybody. The saying was, cross your heart, hope to die, stick a needle in your eye. Cancel, cancel, cancel. We used to say that all the time. So that sticking a needle in your eye thing, that really makes me think of adrenochrome. And we all know what that is if you don't look it up. And another thing they would do, and I don't know if this is common in all children or not, and I never did it, was there was a thing where you'd cut your thumb or your finger and the other person wouldn't. You'd stick your fingers together and cross your blood, and then you were blood brothers or blood sisters. That was an actual thing that a lot of children in my neighborhood did. They would play with Ouija boards, which was not my thing. I never did it, except one of my very good friends, her older sisters had one, and we snuck it out to the garage and we were playing with it. Well, I thought it was all made up nonsense, so I wasn't really playing. I was moving the thing, whatever you call it, so that it said what I wanted to. But children really, they can open themselves up to attachments and evil spirits when they play that kind of thing. So back to Paul Lynde. So what I found out about him, and this was very interesting, he did have a past life, an Arcturian past life. And so a lot of what they talked about on this show was magic and spells, and the spells that they wrote were always in poetry. Reason being, I guess it gives it a little more of an energetic oomph, so to speak. And so he's the one that inspires a lot of the poetry that I write. And I'm wondering, why would I have this connection with Paul Lynde? I mean, he was just someone on TV, and I thought he was funny, and I liked watching him. I'm wondering, why in the world would I have this connection with him? Well, very interesting. What I found out was that, and I'm going to make another video on this, was that he actually, um, from the Oversoul, one of his experiences was one of his experiences was as a composer back in the 1700s. He was actually Mozart. And I took a couple screenshots of him and Mozart. Now, Mozart, it was a painting, so the whole image wasn't captured. It depends on the artist. It wasn't captured as well. But when you put those two pictures side by side, their profiles look almost identical. That's what I'm picking up. He was actually Mozart. That's the communication I'm getting from him. And so when I looked up Mozart, 1700s, I believe he died in his 30s of a kidney disease. But when I looked him up, his full name, there were four names, and I just can't remember one of the names right at the moment. I have it written down somewhere. But it was Wolfgang Theophilus, something else, Mozart. Well, for many, many, many years, gosh, this is back in the early 2000s as well, I had done guided meditation with one of my friends. We each did the meditation for each other, and we asked to meet our spiritual parents, which at the time I didn't quite understand what a spiritual parent was, but we're just going with it. So we do it, and the two that I get for my spiritual parents were, and so this would have been like the parent I had in my first incarnation on work was what it actually, Earth was what it actually is. So the names I got was Athena and Theophilus. And when I found that, it just clicked. I went, oh, he was a parent of mine way, way, way back, like 10,000 years ago. And what I found odd was that um, all of the Greek mythology, and it is just mythology, so we have to keep that in mind. But all of our Greek mythology tells us that Athena did not have any children. She had a few that she raised, supposedly, that were not her biological children. Well, apparently that's not true. And I ask over and over again, was this the goddess Athena, or was this someone else named Athena that was my mother in that lifetime? And I get definitely it was the goddess Athena. So apparently, unless I'm just totally getting wrong information, and I don't think so, that those two, Paul Lynde, were my parents eons ago. And now Paul Lynde is, you got to look at this. If he was Mozart in a past life, another incarnation, that's a pretty good indication, and I'm getting confirmation on this, that he was had a past life, an Arcturian past life. And so he would have also been what we call a star-seeded individual, came into this life to carry out this role so he could continue to the point I'm trying to make is so he could continue into with the sound healing for the ascension on this planet. So this has been known for eons that eventually this planet would ascend and be a fifth density planet. And he had a past lifetime in Arcturus. He was Mozart, and he was Paul Lynde, and he was other individuals as well. I'm going to talk about this a little more in another video that I make where I talk about how the whole Oversoul kind of works together. The other thing that I found interesting is that the Wolfgang name. Well, there's a constellation that has a wolf planet in it. It is the Aquarius constellation. And so my belief is that the name Wolfgang was actually given to him. His mother must have been connected and intuitive, I'm thinking, whoever named him, because I'm thinking that that has something to do that he came from, and I don't have the words to explain this, that he had a past life, whatever, from within this constellation because of the Wolfgang name. See, what my guides tell me is back in antiquity, back in those days, people would pick up on those things and name their children with how their lifetimes, a combination of their lifetimes, they would give them specific names that matched those lifetimes. So I found that very interesting. And point I wanted to make, so because it's not always when you're a medium and you're working with a client and you're talking with one of their relatives, it's because of your client that has that genetic connection, that you're connected with their higher self, that you're able to speak with the relative of this person. Some maybe can, but to me, I don't know how it's done, where if you don't have some kind of genetic link, how the communication is made, except for maybe some people do have that ability. But just, and I do have that ability, but just if I was an average person that was, that meditated and did spiritual practices and had that consciousness, I would be able to connect with him because of the biological genetic connection. So that's how that's done. So I just found it very interesting, and these are some of my toys I bought during Mother's Day month that I'm using for my videos. So I want to just take a look at my notes and see if I got everything I wanted to cover. And I did. So with that, have a blessed day. I love you all. My website is www.embody-light.com, and I'll see you again for another video. Oh, also, if you're interested in the Lionsgate meditation, singing bowl meditation we're doing, that will be August 8th. You can send me an email through my website, and I can send you a link and a ticket, but that'll be a profound event, and that's going to be August 8th at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. I love you all. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.